I quit my job on a Tuesday. No warning. No goodbye party. No dramatic speech in the middle of the office while everyone stopped typing and stared. Just me, a sealed envelope, and the quiet click of dress shoes on marble floors as I walked straight to her office, set the letter on her desk, and walked back out before she could even look up from her laptop. That was 3 days ago, and I have not slept once since. My name is Cole. For 3 years, I was the executive assistant to Adrian Wolfe, CEO of Wolfe Sterling Consulting, one of the most respected firms in all of Seattle. I scheduled her meetings. I managed her calls. I knew her coffee order by heart, knew which clients made her tense before she even opened her mouth, knew the exact way her posture changed when a deal was going wrong versus when it was going very, very right. I knew her better than almost anyone, and that was exactly the problem. Because somewhere between the late nights and the early mornings, between the board meetings and the budget reviews, between handing her folders and watching her work through problems that would have broken most people, I fell in love with her. I know. It sounds like the beginning of a story someone would roll their eyes at. The assistant, the CEO, the cliché. But here is the thing about clichés: they exist because they happen. Over and over and over again. And when you are living inside one, it does not feel like a cliché at all. It feels like something heavy sitting right in the center of your chest that you carry around every single day and try very hard not to show. Adrian Wolfe was not easy to know. She was sharp and controlled and the kind of focus that made other people in the room feel slightly out of breath. She wore charcoal suits almost exclusively. She did not waste words. She had a way of looking at a problem, really looking at it, that made you feel like every other person in the world was only seeing the surface of things while she had already figured out what was underneath. People respected her deeply and feared her quietly. But I saw the other parts. I saw her forget to eat for an entire day when a major deal started unraveling. Not because she was too busy, but because when something mattered to her, her whole body went somewhere else. I saw her stay in the conference room long after every single light in the rest of the office had gone off, just sitting there, staring out at the Seattle skyline like the city was saying something back to her. I saw her be genuinely kind to the janitor who came in every Thursday evening, asked the man about his daughter's science fair, remembered her name, asked about her again the following week. Nobody else noticed those things. I noticed all of them. And then there was the way she looked at me sometimes. Not always, not even often, but sometimes in the middle of a conversation about something completely ordinary. A rescheduled call, a document that needed her signature. She would pause, just for a second, and look at me in a way that made the whole room feel quieter. Like she was thinking about something that had nothing to do with the document at all. She never said anything. Neither did I, because I was her employee, because she was my boss, because there were 17 very clear and very sensible reasons why the thing I was feeling needed to stay exactly where it was. Locked up, tucked away, never spoken out loud. And I was good at that. For 3 years I was very, very good at that. Until spring. Started as a small rumor. A whisper in the break room. A comment buried at the bottom of a business column in a local paper. Adrian Wolfe, reportedly, was engaged to Celeste Hargrove, the son of a powerful industry partner whose family had been trying to merge interests with Wolfe and Sterling for years. I told myself it did not matter. I read the article 3 more times that same night. Within 2 weeks, the rumor had grown into something bigger. People at the office were talking about it openly. A business blog published a piece calling it the alliance that would reshape Seattle's consulting landscape. Someone taped a printed copy to the break room board as a joke. I took it down without saying why. And slowly, something inside me that I had been holding together very carefully for a very long time started to come apart. Because this was the moment I had always known was coming. The moment that confirmed what I had suspected all along. That the world Adrian Wolfe lived in operated on a completely different set of rules. That people like her did not fall in love the way regular people did. They made decisions. They formed alliances. They picked partners the way they picked strategies, carefully, logically, with both eyes on the long-term result. There was no room in that world for me. And so I made a decision of my own. I typed the resignation letter on a Sunday evening. Short, professional, clean. No extra words. No explanation beyond the formal ones. I read it back 4 times and changed nothing. I printed it. I folded it. I put it in an envelope and wrote her name on the front in my own handwriting, which I immediately regretted because it felt too personal for something that was supposed to feel like a business decision. Monday night, I barely slept. Tuesday morning, I walked into the office 40 minutes early. Her door was open. She was already there. Already working, jacket still on, coffee untouched beside her keyboard. I walked in, set the envelope on the corner of her desk without a word, and turned to leave. Cole. Her voice was even, calm, the way it always was. I stopped but did not turn around. I heard the sound of the envelope being picked up, the soft tear of it opening. A pause that lasted just long enough to make the back of my neck feel warm. Is this about the Hargrove deal? I turned then. She was looking at the letter, not at me. Her expression had not changed. It's about growth, I said. Mine. Her eyes moved from the letter to my face. And there it was again, that pause. That quiet, unreadable second where I had absolutely no idea what she was thinking. You're making a mistake, she said. Maybe, I said. But it's mine to make. She did not say anything after that. I walked out of her office, down the hall, into the elevator. I pressed the lobby button and watched the doors close and stood very still while the elevator dropped 22 floors. By the time I reached the street, I had already decided I was not going to cry about it. I cried about it the entire drive home. The next 2 days were strange. Quiet in a way that felt loud, if that makes any sense. My apartment, which had always felt perfectly fine, suddenly felt too still. I cleaned things that did not need cleaning. I made lists of things I needed to do now that I had no job and then stared at the lists without doing any of them. I blocked her number on Wednesday afternoon. I told myself it was for my own good. I told myself I was moving on. I was halfway through a bowl of soup I did not really want on Thursday evening, sitting on my couch with absolutely nothing worth watching on television, when someone knocked on my front door. I was not expecting anyone. I set down the bowl. I walked to the door. I opened it. And my entire plan to move on collapsed in about 2 seconds flat. Because Adrian Wolfe was standing on my doorstep. No jacket. No tie. Collar open at the throat. Hair slightly damp from the Seattle rain that had been falling all evening. Not my boss. Not the CEO. Just her. And she looked at me the way she had never quite let herself look at me before. Like she had run out of reasons not to. She did not say anything right away. She just stood there in the rain, looking at me like a woman who had rehearsed exactly what she was going to say, and then forgotten every word of it the moment I opened the door. I gripped the door frame. You could have called, I said. I did, she replied quietly. You blocked me. There was no accusation in her voice. Just a fact stated plainly the way she stated most things. And somehow that was worse than if she had sounded angry about it, because it meant she understood exactly why I did it and had shown up anyway. My heart was doing something completely embarrassing. What are you doing here, Adrian? She exhaled slowly. Her eyes did not leave mine. I couldn't sleep, she said. I couldn't sit in that office and pretend everything was fine. I tried. I answered emails. I took calls. I sat through 2 meetings today and retained almost nothing because all I could think about was the fact that you handed me that letter and walked out and I let you. I did not say anything. I let you, she said again, quieter this time, like she was saying it more to herself than to me. And I have been asking myself ever since why I did that. The rain was picking up behind her, tapping steadily against the steps. Car passed slowly on the street. Neither of us moved. Come inside, I said finally. You're getting wet. She stepped through the door and I closed it behind her. She stood in my small entryway looking slightly out of place. Not because there was anything wrong with her, but because Adrian Wolfe in a boardroom made complete sense and Adrian Wolfe standing in my apartment next to my coat rack and my grocery bag from 2 days ago felt like 2 completely different worlds touching. I went to the kitchen and came back with a towel. She took it, said thank you, did not use it. I need to say something, she said. Okay. I am not marrying Celeste Hargrove. The words landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Isterte here. The engagement, she continued, was never real. My father had been pushing the idea for over a year. The board caught wind of it and assumed it was moving forward. Someone said something to someone else, and by the time it reached a journalist it had turned into an announcement that I never actually made. I felt something loosen in my chest. And then I felt something tighten right back up. "You let me believe it," I said. "I know. I read 3 articles, Adrian. 3. And not once did you pull me aside and say, 'This is not what it looks like.'" "I know," she said again. Her jaw shifted slightly. "I thought if you believed it, you would move on. I thought it would be easier." "Easier for who?" She looked at me directly then. "For you," she said. "Because the alternative was telling you the truth about why I kept my distance. And that felt like handing you something I had no right to hand you while you were still working for me." I opened my mouth and then closed it again. That was not the answer I had been expecting. I had been ready to be angry. I had a whole architecture of frustration built up over the past 3 days, and I had been fully prepared to use it. But she had just quietly removed the foundation of it without even raising her voice, and now I was standing in my own living room not entirely sure what to do next. "Sit down," I said. "Please." We sat across from each other, her on the edge of my couch, me in the chair with my feet tucked under me, the lamp on the side table throwing everything in soft yellow light. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, it felt very quiet. She told me about her father. Not everything, not all at once, but enough. Enough for me to start understanding the shape of a life I had only ever seen the outside of. Her father had co-founded Wolfe and Sterling 26 years ago, and still held enough board influence to make Adrian's decisions feel like they required a second signature. The Hargrove family partnership had been her father's idea from the beginning, a way to expand the firm's reach and signal to investors that the company was moving into a new chapter of stability and growth. "He doesn't see it as pressure," Adrian said. "He genuinely believes he's helping. That's almost the harder part." "What does he think about you being here right now?" I asked. Adrian looked at me steadily. "He doesn't know." Something about that answer felt important. I looked down at my hands. I thought about 3 years of mornings and late evenings and all the small things I had noticed and tucked away. I thought about the resignation letter I had been so proud of for being clean and professional and emotionless. I thought about crying in my car on a Tuesday. "I don't know what you want me to say," I told her honestly. "I'm not asking you to say anything," she said. "I just needed you to know the truth. That the story you read, the one that made you hand me that letter, was not real. And that the reason I never said anything sooner was not because I didn't want to." The rain outside softened slightly. "Then why?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Because wanting something and knowing what to do with it are 2 very different things," she said. "And I have spent a long time being good at the second one while pretending I didn't have a problem with the first." The room felt very still. This was not the Adrian Wolfe that Seattle saw. This was not the woman in the charcoal suit, the one who walked into rooms and instantly became the most certain person in them. This was someone sitting in a quiet apartment in the rain, saying something true out loud, probably for the first time in a long time. And I did not know yet what any of this meant for us. I did not know if there even was an US. But I knew one thing clearly, sitting there in that lamplit room while the city got rained on outside my window. She had not come here to win an argument or fix a business problem or manage a situation. She had come because she did not want me to have the wrong version of the story. And as small as that sounds, that mattered more to me than almost anything she could have said. "It's late," I said quietly. "I know. And I'm not. I'm not ready to figure out what this is yet, or if it's anything." "I'm not asking you to," she said. She stood, picked up her jacket from where she had set it on the armrest. "I just needed you to know." She moved toward the door. I followed her. She paused with one hand on the frame and looked back at me over her shoulder. And in that moment, with the rain behind her and the light from my hallway catching the side of her face, she looked less like a CEO and more like a person. Just a person, tired and uncertain and trying. "I'm sorry I waited too long," she said. I nodded once. She stepped out into the rain. I closed the door softly, and I stood with my back against it in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the ceiling, knowing with complete certainty that nothing about the next few weeks was going to be simple. But for the first time since Tuesday morning, I did not feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was standing at the beginning of it. She texted me 4 days after that night. Not a long message. Not an explanation. Just 7 words. Would you have dinner with me? Somewhere quiet. I read it 3 times standing in my kitchen with a mug of tea going cold in my hand. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stared at the wall for a solid 2 minutes before picking it back up and typing yes. I told myself it was just dinner. I almost believed it. She picked a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill, the kind of place with no logo on the door and candles stuck into old wine bottles and a menu written on a chalkboard above the bar. Not somewhere you go to be seen. Somewhere you go because you actually want to talk. That detail alone told me something I filed quietly away. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting at a corner table, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbows, looking at her phone with the focused expression I had seen 1,000 times in conference rooms. Then she looked up, and the expression shifted into something easier, something almost relieved. You came, she said. I said I would, I replied, sitting down across from her. I know. I wasn't completely sure you meant it. That small admission from a woman who never admitted uncertainty about anything. I felt it settle somewhere in the room between us like it had weight. We ordered. We ate. And slowly, carefully, like 2 people dismantling something one small piece at a time, we talked. Not about work. Not about the firm or her father or the Hargrove situation. We talked about the things that had always existed just outside the edges of our professional relationship. The things we had both carefully avoided for 3 years because there had always been a desk and a title and a very clear set of boundaries between us. She told me about growing up in a house where success was the only language her father spoke fluently, where report cards were reviewed like quarterly earnings, where emotions were treated as inefficiencies. She said it without self-pity, just matter-of-factly, the way you describe weather. But I heard what was underneath it. I told her about moving to Seattle from a small town in Oregon at 23 with 2 suitcases and a job offer I had been terrified to accept. About how I had spent the first year feeling like everyone around me already knew something I didn't. About how I had gotten very good at making myself useful so no one would look too closely at how uncertain I actually felt. She listened the way she looked at problems. Completely, with nothing left over for anything else. You never seemed uncertain, she said. Not once. Neither did you, I said. She picked up her glass. Apparently, we were both doing the same thing. The candle between us had burned down almost an inch by the time we finished eating. Neither of us had looked at our phones. Outside, the street was wet from an earlier rain, and the light from the restaurant caught the puddles on the sidewalk in small orange circles. I did not want to leave. That realization arrived quietly and sat down without asking permission. But I was also aware, very aware, that dinner being easy did not make everything else easy. Her world was still her world. Her father was still her father. And I was still a man who had quit his job a few weeks ago and was currently living on savings and a loose plan. We stepped outside around 9:30. The air was cool and damp and smelled like coffee from a shop 2 doors down. I'd like to do this again, she said. This was one dinner, Adrian. I know what it was, she said simply. I'd still like to do it again. I looked at her standing there on the wet sidewalk under a storefront light, hands in her pockets, waiting. No pressure in it. No performance. Just a straightforward ask from someone who had apparently decided that straightforward was the only way left to go. Okay, I said. She nodded once. Called me a car. Waited on the curb until it arrived. Didn't try to make it more than it was. That was a Thursday. By Monday, a photograph was on the internet. Not a dramatic photo. Just the 2 of us walking out of the restaurant side by side. Taken from across the street, slightly blurry at the edges. But the caption underneath it was sharp enough. Adrian Wolfe and former assistant spotted at intimate Capitol Hill dinner. Hargrove Alliance officially off the table. I saw it at 7 in the morning and felt my stomach drop. By 9, 3 more outlets had picked it up. By noon, Adrian's new assistant, a perfectly competent woman named Beth who I had no strong feelings about, sent me a message through a mutual contact saying that things at the office were, quote, tense today. Adrian called at 12:15. You've seen it, she said. Everyone's seen it. A short pause.
I'm sorry.
I should have thought about visibility. It's a photograph of two people leaving a restaurant, I said. We didn't do anything wrong. I know that, she said. My father does not currently share that interpretation. And there was the other shoe. Her father had called an emergency meeting with two board members that same morning. Celeste Hargrove's family had issued a brief public statement, gracious in wording, pointed in timing, expressing their mutual decision to pursue separate paths professionally and personally. It sounded dignified. It also effectively told every investor paying attention that the alliance they had been counting on was gone, and that the reason was standing on a sidewalk in Capitol Hill looking at Adrian Wolfe. That reason was me. By Tuesday evening, I was sitting on the floor of my apartment with my back against the couch, laptop open, reading things about myself that felt both completely unreal and somehow entirely predictable. Opinion pieces about professional boundaries. Comment sections that had decided what I was and what I wanted and what kind of person I must be, based entirely on one blurry photograph. I closed the laptop. I sat there in the quiet for a long time, and then I did something that surprised even me. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. I was going to call you, she said. I know, I said, but I needed to say something first. Okay. I am not going to disappear because things got complicated, I said, but I also need you to be honest with me. Not CEO honest, where you manage the information carefully and tell me what you think I can handle. Actually honest, because if we are going to figure out whatever this is, I need to know what we are actually dealing with. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where someone is actually thinking. My father is going to push back hard, she said finally. The board is rattled. There will be more stories, and I cannot promise that any of it gets clean or easy in the short term. I'm not asking for clean or easy, I said. I'm asking for true. Another pause. Then here is what's true, she said. I have spent a very long time running a company that I built partly to prove something to a man who has never once told me I was enough. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, you were the only part of my day that felt completely real. I don't want to manage that. I don't want to be strategic about it. I just want to stop pretending it isn't there. I pressed my hand flat against the carpet. Outside my window, Seattle kept moving. Cars and lights and all the ordinary noise of a city that had no idea what was happening in this apartment. Okay, I said quietly. Okay, I said again. Then we figure it out. She exhaled, slow and long, like she had been holding something in her chest for a very long time and had finally just set it down. Neither of us said anything for a moment after that. We did not need to, because some things do not need more words once the right ones have already been said. 3 weeks after that phone call, Adrian walked into the most important meeting of her professional career. And she did not walk in with a strategy. She walked in with the truth. The annual investor summit for Wolfe and Sterling was held every year at a conference center overlooking Elliott Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Catered breakfast that no one touched. Rows of chairs filled with people whose primary interest in Adrian Wolfe was entirely tied to numbers and projections and what she planned to do next. I was not in the room. I watched from a live stream on my laptop, sitting cross-legged on my couch in jeans and a gray sweater, a cup of coffee on the cushion beside me, feeling the kind of nervous that lives in your shoulders and will not be reasoned with. The whispers leading into that morning had been loud. Multiple financial blogs had speculated that Adrian would use the summit to announce a new institutional partnership, a clear signal to investors that the Hargrove situation was behind her and the company was back on stable ground. Her father had reportedly spent the entire previous week calling board members individually. Someone had even leaked a draft talking points document, full of careful language about strategic alignment and long-term vision. Adrian did not use any of it. She stood at the front of that room and waited for the ambient noise to settle, the way she always did, patiently, without rushing it, letting the silence do its work. And when the room was quiet, she started speaking. She did not open with the company's performance numbers. She did not open with a slide deck. She opened with something no one in that room had heard from her before. Honesty that had no professional distance wrapped around it. She talked about what the past several years had actually looked like from the inside. About making decisions built around managing perception rather than leading with clarity. About allowing outside pressure to shape choices that should have been entirely hers. She did not name her father. She did not need to. Every person in that room who knew anything about Wolfe and Sterling understood exactly what she was referencing. She said, plainly and without apology, that the Hargrove partnership had never been her decision to begin with, that she had allowed it to advance further than it should have because she had confused loyalty with agreement for far too long. And then she said something that made the whole room go very still. The strongest version of this company is not built on who I am willing to align with. It is built on whether you can trust what I say. And you cannot trust what I say if I am managing you instead of talking to you. So today that stops. A man near the back shifted in his seat. Someone near the front wrote something down. Her father, seated in the third row, did not move at all. I gripped my coffee mug without drinking from it. The applause, when it came, started slowly. One person, then a few, then the whole room, not wild or celebratory but steady and growing, the kind of sound that means something was recognized rather than just performed. I set down the mug and pressed both hands to my face. Later, much later, after the formal session had ended and the room had shifted into the loose conversations of a post-meeting reception, she called me. I picked up before the second ring. I heard, I said. Was it too much? She asked. No, I said. It was exactly enough. She was quiet for a moment. Then, my father left without speaking to me. I did not rush to fill that silence. Some things need to be sat with rather than solved. How do you feel? I asked. Lighter, she said, like she was surprised by her own answer. Strangely, genuinely lighter. The weeks that followed were not simple. Anyone who expected that one honest speech would dissolve years of institutional pressure was not paying attention to how these things actually work. There were difficult conversations with board members. There were investors who needed individual reassurance. There was a tense and carefully worded exchange between Adrian and her father that she told me about in pieces over several evenings. Never all at once, because some things are only processable in small amounts. But the company did not fall. In fact, it steadied. Not immediately, and not without effort, but steadily and with a kind of solidity that felt different from before. Less performed, more actual. And somewhere inside all of that, quietly and without announcement, Adrian and I built something real. Not fast. Not without friction. There were evenings where the weight of everything her world carried landed heavily between us, and we had to find our way back to each other through honest conversation rather than just good intentions. There were moments when I questioned whether I was strong enough for all of it. There were moments when she had to learn, visibly, imperfectly, how to let someone in without managing them. None of it was a fairy tale. All of it was worth it. 6 months after that investor summit, on a clear evening at a small vineyard outside Seattle where the light came in low and golden through the vine rows and about 30 people sat on wooden chairs, she walked toward me across a stretch of grass that someone had scattered with white petals. I saw her coming from across the whole length of it, and I watched her face do something I had seen it do only a handful of times in all the years I had known her. It simply let go of the composure and the control and the careful management of expression. All of it gone. Just her. Looking at me the way she had never quite let herself look at me before. Like she had finally arrived somewhere. She reached me. I took her hands. You could have left the office, she said quietly. I looked at her. This complicated, stubborn, quietly tender woman who had driven across a city in the rain just to make sure I had the true version of the story. I know, I said, but I never planned on leaving you. She smiled then. Actually smiled, the rare kind that reached everything. And we got married right there, between the vines and the golden light, in front of the small group of people who actually knew us. Not a merger. Not an alliance. Just two people who had taken the long way to find each other and had finally, completely, arrived.